Sydney just found out the one thing he never wanted to know about Lwandle, and honestly, if you have not watched today's episode of Inimba yet, stop scrolling right now, because what happens in this one changes everything we thought we understood about this family. I am going to break down every moment that mattered, scene by scene, so stay with me till the end because the last few minutes of this episode are the real gut punch. So let's set the scene. We are at Zethu's house, and whenever the Lwandle family gathers under one roof, drama is never far behind. This episode leans hard into that tradition, but it lets the tension simmer quietly before it explodes, and that slow burn is exactly why it hits so hard. There is something almost theatrical about how the show frames this gathering, everyone smiling on the surface, everyone aware that something underneath is about to give way. We open with Sydney, and from the very first scene something is off with him. He is distracted, short with people around him, and anyone following his arc knows Sydney does not get rattled easily. This is a man who has weathered business collapse, family betrayal, and public humiliation without losing his composure, so when we see him pacing, checking his phone, avoiding eye contact with the people closest to him, we know the show is building towards something big. Even his body language in these early scenes tells a story, shoulders tense, jaw tight, the posture of a man bracing for a blow he already senses is coming. That something big is Lwandle. For weeks we have watched Lwandle's return unsettle the entire Lwandle household. His comeback was never going to be a simple homecoming, not with this family's history and the secrets quietly rotting underneath it. What makes this episode different is that Lwandle is no longer hiding. This time the truth comes out of his own mouth, and it lands on Sydney like a weight he was not prepared to carry. I am not going to spoil the exact wording of the confrontation because watching Sydney's face change in real time is something you need to see for yourself, but I will say this, the writers do not let this become a shouting match. There is no dramatic slap, no storming out. Instead we get something quieter and more devastating, a moment where Sydney has to sit with the truth and realize the person he trusted has been carrying something that reshapes his entire understanding of his own family. It is the kind of scene that rewards patience, the kind that asks you to lean in rather than brace for volume. What I appreciate is that the show does not rush it. So many soapies would cram this reveal into a 30-second exchange before cutting to a commercial break, but Inimba lets the silence do the work. There is a long pause after Lwandle finishes speaking, and in that pause you can see every emotion cross Sydney's face, disbelief, anger, grief, and finally something that looks like resignation. That is the mark of strong writing, letting the actors carry the weight instead of relying on dialogue to spell it out. It also says something about how far this show has come stylistically, trusting silence in a genre that usually fears it. Now let's talk about what this means for the rest of the family, because Sydney's reaction does not exist in a vacuum. This episode is really about how one revelation ripples outward and touches everyone under that roof. We see Zolika in the background of several scenes, and if you have been following her arc alongside Lazarus, you know their marriage has been under enormous strain lately. Trust and equality have become the two words defining their relationship right now, and this episode pushes both to their limit. Lazarus and Zolika have always had one of the more complicated dynamics on this show. On the surface they look like a power couple who have figured out how to balance ambition with partnership, but underneath there has always been a power struggle simmering, about who leads, who follows, who gets to make the big calls without consulting the other. This episode does not resolve that tension, if anything it deepens it, but it does give us a rare moment where the two of them actually win something together. There is a brief scene of triumph between them, a small victory that feels earned after everything they have been through, and for a moment it looks like this couple might find their footing again. You can see it in the way they finally look at each other without suspicion, even if just for a moment. But do not get too comfortable, because right after that moment of triumph, the show reminds us that Sydney's family is unraveling in the background even as Lazarus and Zolika are celebrating. That contrast is deliberate. The editing juxtaposes joy in one storyline against heartbreak in another, creating this uncomfortable feeling that no matter how good things look for one character, someone else close to them is falling apart. It is a technique this show has used before, but rarely this effectively. Speaking of falling apart, we cannot skip Zethu, because her story continues to be one of the most emotionally heavy threads on the show right now. Her journey into motherhood has taken a turn a lot of viewers were not expecting, and it is clear the writers are handling the subject of postpartum struggles with real intention. This is not a storyline being used for shock value, it is being treated with the weight it deserves, and that matters for a show with the reach Inimba has. Representation of this kind, done thoughtfully, can genuinely help viewers who are going through something similar feel seen. We see glimpses of Zethu isolated, overwhelmed, pulling away from the people trying to help her, and it is heartbreaking to watch because we know she is not a bad person, she is a person in crisis who does not know how to ask for help, or who has been let down so many times she has stopped believing help is even possible. Though Betrayal continues to hover around the edges of this story, trying in her own imperfect way to be present for her daughter, and Tamika remains a steady, if sometimes overstepping, presence trying to hold things together. The tension between these two mother figures, one biological and flawed, one adoptive and structured, continues to be one of the more nuanced parts of this arc, and I think it is one of the more underrated character dynamics on the show right now. What struck me in this episode specifically is a quiet scene where Zethu is left alone with the baby, and the camera lingers just a little too long on her face, long enough for us to feel the discomfort, the disconnect, the fear she cannot articulate. It is a small moment, easy to miss if you are not paying attention, but it says more about where her character is headed than any dialogue could. Moments like that are why I think this show deserves more credit than it sometimes gets for its quieter storytelling choices. Back to the main event, because Sydney's storyline is really the emotional core of this episode. Once the shock of Lwandle's confession settles, we see how Sydney chooses to move forward, and this is where the episode shows its hand. Sydney does not explode. He does not immediately cut Lwandle off. Instead he retreats inward, and we are left wondering whether this is a man calculating his next move, or a man simply too hurt to know what to do next. Knowing this show, it is probably both. There is a particularly striking scene near the midpoint where Sydney sits alone, and the show uses silence and space in a way that feels almost cinematic for a daily soapie. No dialogue, just Sydney, a drink he does not touch, and the weight of everything he has just learned settling over him. It is a bold choice for a show that usually moves faster, and it pays off because it forces the audience to sit in his discomfort with him. You almost want to look away, and that is exactly the point. Meanwhile, the dynamics around Hlathie's house continue to shift. Hlathie himself remains something of a stabilizing presence in this episode, the one person trying to hold the peace even as everyone around him is either celebrating or grieving. His role in this family has always been complicated, caught between loyalty to different people who do not always want the same things, and this episode leans into that. There is a moment where he tries to mediate between two family members who are clearly not ready to hear each other, and it does not fully work, but the attempt tells us a lot about where his character is headed in the coming weeks. It also reminds us why he has become such an anchor point in this ensemble. By the final act, the emotional threads start to converge. Sydney's confrontation with the truth about Lwandle, Zolika and Lazarus's fragile victory, Zethu's continued unraveling, they all exist under the same roof, literally and figuratively, and the episode makes it feel like one connected story rather than three plots stitched together. That is not always easy to pull off in a daily drama format, but this episode manages it, and the direction deserves credit for keeping the tonal shifts from feeling jarring. The final scene is where everything lands. Without giving away every detail, Sydney is left with a decision to make, one the show clearly wants us to sit with until the next episode airs. Is he going to confront Lwandle publicly and expose what he knows to the rest of the family, or is he going to hold on to this truth a little longer while he figures out what it means for his own position within the family? The episode ends on that uncertainty, and it is a smart choice because it leaves the audience with genuine anticipation rather than a neatly wrapped resolution. It is the kind of ending that makes the wait for tomorrow's episode feel unbearable in the best way. What this episode does really well overall is balance. It juggles multiple heavy storylines: betrayal, marital strain, postpartum struggle, family loyalty, without letting any single one overwhelm the others. Each thread gets room to breathe, and the performances across the board are strong enough to carry the emotional weight the script is asking of them. Siyabonga Shaib in particular deserves credit here. His portrayal of Sydney's slow unraveling is subtle and controlled in a way that elevates what could have been a very melodramatic scene into something genuinely affecting. The supporting cast around him matches that energy too. Nobody feels like they are just filling space. If I had one criticism, it is that the pacing in the middle third slows down a bit more than it needs to. A couple of scenes, particularly around the Lazarus and Zulika celebration, could have been trimmed to give more time to the Sydney and Lwandle fallout, which is clearly the heart of this episode. But that is a minor gripe in what is otherwise one of the stronger episodes of this run, and it does not take away from how effective the overall episode is. So where does this leave us heading into the next episode? Sydney now knows the truth about Lwandle, and how he chooses to act on that knowledge is going to determine the direction of this entire family for weeks to come. Zulika and Lazarus got their moment of triumph, but we all know this show never lets anyone stay happy for long, so expect that fragile trust between them to be tested again very soon. And Zethu's journey continues to be one of the more sensitive and important storylines on South African television right now, one I hope the show continues to treat with the care it has shown so far. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think Sydney is going to do now that he knows the truth. Do you think he confronts Lwandle head-on, or do you think he plays this quietly and uses it as leverage down the line? And let me know what you think about how the show is handling Zethu's story, because I think it is one of the more important conversations the show is having right now, and I would love to know if it is resonating with you the way it is resonating with me. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like this video and subscribe for daily Inimba reviews, because we are covering every episode as it airs and I do not want you missing a single update. Drop your predictions in the comments, share this video with your fellow Inimba fans, and I will see you right back here for the next episode breakdown. Until then, take care of yourselves, and let's see what Sydney does next.